Good morning. I would like to call this meeting to order. The time is 9 a.m. Welcome to a governing board study session. Today is Wednesday, October 30th, 2024. I am Lisa Pelosi, board president, and I would like to introduce my fellow trustees. Board vice president, Miss Laura Simon, is here. She just stepped out for a moment. Clerk to the board, Miss Sean Mora, trustee Mrs. Jeannie Kerr, and trustee Miss Jean Marie Wolf will be joining us momentarily. Also joining us are district staff members, acting superintendent, Mr. Chris Heller, chief business official, Dr. Kay Vang, executive assistant to the assistant superintendent, Miss Melissa Hansen, director of technology, Mr. Derek Machado, director of facilities and operations, Mr. Mike Flores. This study session will be facilitated with the help of our partners from Casa Studios, Mr. Trent Summers, Greystone West, Mr. John Delina, and Mr. Steve, I don't want to butcher your name here, Petkovich, thank you. And from, is Gopal's not here yet, but he's coming. Okay. And then from how do I pronounce it? Rakolte, thank you. Rakolte Energy, Mr. Gopal Shankar will be joining us. A copy of this board meeting will be available on our website at www.stalenaunified.org. Okay, approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Okay, motion carried. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item 4A is the consideration of approval for an independent services agreement between St. Helena Unified School District and Solient Agency, I believe. Is that how I pronounce it?
That is correct.
Okay, Mr. Heller, please.
The board is asked to consider approving this short-term contract for specialized services to support a student at the primary school. The student in this case has behaviors that require services that are beyond a para 2 support level, and so this contract has a need, and it's a short-term contract based on how the behaviors can be corrected, so it may not go till the end of the school year, but it is asked to approve for the total cost, which may be about $72,000. I can answer any further questions if needed.
Is there anyone who cares to publicly comment on this agenda item? We do not have anybody present for the record. Trustees, any questions about this agenda item?
I think you answered. My question was going to be, what is the duration? Because it was so it's for this school year. May not need the full
duration, so it's a cost not to exceed $72,000, but it could resolve itself in a shorter period of time, and then the contract would end once it's determined that is no longer needed.
And then I believe the contract said it was a renewal.
Yeah, it did say renewal.
So that's why I was just confused. Is this someone that we used last school year?
We've used Soliant in the past. Maybe that's why it's a renewal of the contract. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's just the
renewing
contract.
a contract, but
Right, but the individual services are different in this case.
Okay.
okay.
And then if the need is not here through the end of the school year, is that amount prorated accordingly, or is it 72,000 whether it's for the remainder?
It would be prorated.
It would
yeah.
be prorated. Okay.
Yeah.
Trustees,
That's
anything
it.
else? Okay. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the independent services agreement between St. Helena Unified School District and Solient Agency as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Okay. Motion carried. Okay, we're now going to move on to our facilities study session. And Dr. Vang, I'll let you get us started from here, please.
All right, thank you, President Pelosi. I'm going to hand it over to Trent Summers with Casa Studios so we can get started immediately. Trent?
Thank you, Dr. Vang. We're going to run through a little bit of a presentation today to kind of recap some the progress that we've made, and then we're going to do a little breakout to a interactive survey. to get some more feedback on some items that we're working to prioritize, and then wrap with a little bit of discussion about funding at both the state and local level. So again, as with all these things, please jump in. These always work better as conversations and presentations. So if you have any questions, just stop me and we'll go from there. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about the facility needs overview. This is going to recap the good work we've been doing to date. We're going to talk about the facility needs funding, sort of the money we have in hand, and then we're going to talk a little bit about project prioritization to how to proactively address those concerns we've been looking at and to put those dollars to good use. Okay, so the first thing, the facility needs overview. This is going to be a recap of what we've presented. We did some extensive work with the board and some good work doing some assessments for what we need at each campus. And so these are just sort of the same run-ups that we've done at each campus. We've looked at kind of the deferred maintenance needs, right? The warm, safe, dry, replacing HVAC, addressing dry rot, leading asphalt repair, constructing some trash enclosures. And then we did this assessment for all campuses, right? Because we want to make sure we look at the campus, the district equity level, and make sure that all of this is looked at a comprehensive level from a district-wide view. And what we've come to do is, oh no, do not reboot now. Sorry, I'll work through my trigger there for a second and we'll get moving forward. We came to a need for about $83 million, right? And that is over the district-wide needs. That's looking at each campus. And that is completely normal, right? Throughout the state of California, we have those discussions. Oftentimes, the needs of a school district, or almost all times, the needs of a school district outweighs the available funding, right? So what happens at this point is, once we sort of have our head wrapped around what we need to do, we want to start assessing in a quantifiable way, how do we begin to make wise and informed decisions about our facilities given the funding that we have, right? So we moved through a facility prioritization activity, right? We looked at how do we do this in a way that addresses all of the needs of the district. We applied this matrix to it, right? So we did the, we defined the priorities, we assigned levels of importance to them, and then went through a simple yes and no questions to make sure that we applied that equitably to all projects. This is the work we've been doing the last couple months to get to today. And these are the average rankings. We talked to the board and community about this to make sure that those rankings are aligned with what the community wants, as well as staff and board. And then we began to apply this, and we made this incredibly overwhelming spreadsheet, which we've shown you a couple times. But this lists all of your projects, right, in the left-hand column. And then across, as we move our way across to the right, we've applied this yes or no matrix to generate a total project score for each one of them. We've also gone through the construction management team to assign hard costs and soft costs to create total project costs for that, and then worked with your state funding experts to see if there's money available at the state level, right? Now, from that list, we came to a group of projects that all received the highest total score, right? Then, and that list is what we have right below here in the bottom left. You'll notice that they're all at this point at the primary school and elementary school. That is driven because that is where your state level funding eligibility is, right? So that's the one trigger that separates those two campuses. RLS is going to have some eligibility in the next couple of years, which will then bring those into this list as well. But right now, because we prioritized immediate funding, we wanted to make sure that that's where that discrepancy is right now. RLS will come into this list in a couple of years when those buildings become of age. Okay, that kind of narrows this list down from 83 million to about 22 million, all right, which is still above the funding we have available. And so what we want to start talking about is how do we make wise, prioritized decisions about how to take on this work. This is the money that we have right now. Right, we have about $3 million from the general fund contribution. We have about $86,000 left from the GO bond, and we have $1.8 million in your developer fees. The way your developer fee study was written is you can use those funds to modernize schools. Right, so we're looking at about $4.8 million for total project cost. That's what we have available right now. So what we're going to do, right, at this point is I'm going to stop for any questions. Right, this is sort of the recap of where we've been. And kind of how we got to today. And I'll stop for any questions, and then we're going to start talking about ways to prioritize this work and open up some of that discussion. So,
just a clarification on that, you said the primary and elementary are prioritized because state funding is available.
Yeah, so they have modernization eligibility at this time. RLS middle school will become of age, right? It's once those buildings become old enough, they gain modernization eligibility at the state level. And I think RLS is like 2 years out right now. Okay. But we can definitely dial that number in with April from King, who knows all of that.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I had a question, but I think it's for Kay. I think it's back, or maybe it's the slide where you said the total of current available funds. That one. So does this include our reserves? This 4.8? No?
No, this does not include our reserve.
Okay. Thank you.
I had a similar question. So where is this money coming from? What pots?
So this money from the
Oh,
general
right
fund,
there.
if you recall, that $3 million is
see
the
it.
set
It's
aside.
right
Yeah.
from my face. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So my question, so this is just a quick, so slides 4 through 7, have those changed since the last time that we've seen you as far as the totals of
We're going to go through and reassess those costs, but right now the big trigger that we're waiting for is if the state bond passes or not. In the past, when something as significant as the state bond passes, we see a pretty significant increase in the inflation and in the cost. So we're right. It's a big political trigger right now, and so we'll know a lot more in about 2 weeks if we need to come back and adjust those numbers or if the numbers that we have are holding. But as of right now, the numbers are holding to what we've talked about in the past. If that election goes, typically we'll see 10 to 15% bump pretty much within a month. I think the last bond was over the course of 2 years, somewhere around 30 to 35% increase.
Wow. The bump, it would be within a month, it could go 10 to 15% up if
Okay.
the bond, if that
We'll-
measure passes.
We will start building all of our current project. And I don't know, John could probably talk to this a little bit more. We will start building ours in our company 10 to 15% higher. Because what's going to happen, remember, the state has a long list of kind of IOUs that they need to get out to districts. You guys have $11 million of that, right? So if it passes, you're in this approved but unfunded. They're going to start to release a bunch of money very quickly. And anytime that money just sort of flows into that market, it's going to naturally bloat a little and start to push some of those numbers up.
but the 11 million is based on the bond passing?
Yeah, if Prop 2 passes, you are in line. You know, April talked a lot about that. We were really smart. We were really proactive about getting in
Okay.
line for that money. So there's about $11 million sitting at the state level waiting to come to you if Prop 2 is successful. If it's not, they're still out of money.
Okay,
it'll-
and so there's no any money then available to us out of that 11 million if it doesn't pass?
Currently, no. I mean, Newsom came around last time and injected some funding to pay that list down. The state may look to do something similar to that in the future, but right now they're waiting to see if that bond passes to pay that down. There is enough in that measure to pay down all the unfunded and still be, to still go to the state and have a little bit extra. But right now there's no money available at this point.
All right, thank you.
And I just had one question on your wording. I think I misunderstood. When you said if, I guess, Prop 2 passes, we'll see a bump by 10%. Do you mean the cost?
Yeah. It's-
Why would costs go up just because funding is approved?
So what's going to happen is there's a significant amount of backlog at the state. They will fund all of that immediately, and that will flood the market. And then what you will see is contractors responding to that.
Yeah.
Charging more?
Yeah.
Because there's money available?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. I think John can maybe talk a little bit more about that, but that's typically how it's happened in the past.
Yeah, it's almost like there's no longer a concern for the amount of work that's out there because all of a sudden there's a ton of work, right? And so they're able to be a bit more picky, making sure that they're making some profit on these projects.
Okay. Anybody else? All right.
Okay. So what we're going to kind of do now that we've sort of recapped where we are, I want to work to allocate the available funds, or at least discuss how to do that, right? We have a list. We need proactive tools to hand down to Dr. Vang to make sure we can start doing that. We'll talk a little bit more about Prop 2. We kind of got into that conversation, but we have a slide there. And then we're going to discuss increasing the MDM contribution to the general fund. That's going to be some information I want to present to you. That's going to be a question I'll start to pose to you. It's something I'd like you to start thinking about as we look at how the economy is responding. And then we're going to start talking about other ideas or open discussion. So this is going to move into some more kind of free form explanations about that, and just kind of working through that in this workshop opportunity. So again, jump in. We're going to tackle a lot, and please keep the questions coming. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to break from this, and we're going to go to a different presentation that I have that's actually an interactive survey that's going to talk a little bit about how to rank these projects, how to provide any feedback, and we're going to go through that exercise now. So if you'd please bear with me while I exit this and bring the other one up, I will do my best to transition seamlessly. This is a tool. There you go. This is a tool provided by a company named Mentimeter. It's an online active survey. So if you have a digital device, if you have a phone, you can bring it out. You can go to menti, MENTI.com, and use that code right at the top, that 49307650. And you can log on. You can also use the QR code on your phone if you want to grab that. We're going to go through a series of questions. And in them, we're going to do a couple different ways to rank these things. The only thing that I'd ask is that you don't get ahead of me. I think I locked it down. I usually lock it down, but when you get into a room of proactive problem solvers, they skip ahead, and then all of my notes disappear. So then I kind of lose it. So if we all want to kind of go to that menti, MENTI.com, and it should prompt you for a code. That code is 49307650. And if at any time you drop off, you can come right back to that and get right back on. It's also at the top of every slide, so you don't need to worry about losing it. We think it's fun. We think it's an interesting way. It's completely anonymous, right? And there's going to be some open-ended questions, some ranking questions, and some pick your favorite questions. And so this is kind of a way for all of us to speak into some of these things. And if we're all ready, we can kind of start moving forward with that presentation. Again, if you lose or you drop off, you can go right back to the top, and we'll go from there. So the first thing I want to get, and make sure you're kind of tracking with me, and if you are, that is, you're going to come to a slide, right, where we have all of these projects listed. In the bottom right, you'll see that in addition to what we've talked about, we added the Rudd building roof. Right, there's been some issues with that roof, with sort of the decomposition of the slate shingle. So we have added that project. Right, this is a project, we talked a lot about in the past about being proactive, right? But there are always going to be things that we need to be reactive to in a way too. And we've come to know or come to learn in the past couple of weeks that that roof is having some issues with roofing failure as well. So we've brought it into this list. I just want to make everyone aware that this list that you're looking at is a translation of the list that we talked with all of our top scores with the addition of the Rudd building roof. And if we want to stop and talk a little bit more about that, we can. It's experiencing a similar problem that the Vintage Hall roof did, where the slate tiles are starting to experience some failure and coming off the roof as we understand it. Okay.
Yeah, essentially it's delaminating, and you're getting what's called cleaving, and kind of like layers of that slate will be coming off.
So we've added that, right? And this kind of goes along with those conversations we've always had in the past that we need to be proactive, but we always need to hold a little bit of reserve back to be reactive to things that are happening as well, right? So that's really the only problem. You should be prompted in your Menti now to pick, I believe, your top 5 prioritizations, right? So if you were to look at this entire list, right, and say, Trent, of these, 12 different projects, these are the top 5 that are most important to me. Right, we're going to go through in a minute and get a chance to rank all of them, right? But if you have a top 5, it'd be super helpful if you wanted to pick those now. And once you pick those, you can hit submit, and your little dots are going to show up and come flying onto the screen to show where those are actually getting ranked in real time.
So as far as the Rudd building, what is the estimate cost on that one?
I honestly don't know right now if we have that cost.
We don't have that yet. We just got the report back, and there's the report isn't as comprehensive as we needed to be able to get that figured out. But hopefully we'll get that back here at the end of the week, and then we'll be able to put numbers together next week.
Okay, so are you thinking like a couple $1 million, $5 million?
It's probably around $1 million.
$1 million, okay.
Is there any leaking going on?
Steve, are you aware of any leaking?
I'm just thinking warm, safe, dry, because those are our criteria, so.
Okay. Good morning. So to answer your question, they're not reporting any leaks in the main building areas, but We have some roof leaks going on with the little shed roofs that cover the walkways. So it's outside the building envelope.
Okay. And I suppose, so no warranty to help pay for any of this then? The roof is not under any warranty?
Correct. At this point, I don't believe there's any warranty. There may be a partial warranty at this point, but we're not going to get a whole lot from the manufacturer at this
Okay,
point.
Okay, thank you.
Are they suggesting that it's replacement? Did the assessment come back and say if it was like for like, because we've got those slate tiles on there which are so heavy? Do we know, would we go the same route to replace it?
I think we would go with an asphalt shingle to match what we did on this building.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Thank you.
John, I believe though in the meantime we have to trim down the tree because the tree that's on Grayson is also part of the problem, correct? And because we have a quote for that, I believe.
That is correct. That's one of the items that is on the list. It's one of the easier items to take care of.
So you'll see that proposal in the November board agenda for the tree.
My question, I should have probably asked it at the beginning, is so each one of the elementary school, primary school, they have their list of different things that need to be repaired. So what is involved in what does deferred maintenance needs? What would be part of that list?
The deferred maintenance needs that we have them are kind of some of the things we started talking about, like flooring, like the bathroom remodels, those kind of things. Anything that came out of that deferred maintenance, which would be like wearable features such as like the floorings, the ceilings, the walls, that kind of stuff, that hasn't been broken out into site-specific projects. So you'll see that we have a separate project for the exterior paint and dry rot at the primary school. We have replacing the roofing and gutters there, and we have at the elementary school, we have the aged HVAC units. So what we did was we took all of the needs and pulled out some what we saw as high need projects, right? And if we wanted to specifically ask you for permission to do something like, we need to replace just this roof, we wanted to extract it from the deferred maintenance. So what's left over is the stuff that we were not really penning as like the super high need at this point, right? We need to address the dry rot, which is why we broke it out. We'd like you to consider addressing the roofing, which is why we broke it out. The remaining will be finishes, some lighting, gates and fences, stuff like that. Non-security gates and fences, right? The low-level picket fences at the primary school. If it was a project that we thought that we'd like to bundle and have you review specifically, we broke them out at the campuses.
Okay.
So
would that include at the primary school? Would that include the landscaping and things that's on the list as
Yeah,
well
some of-
in the deferred maintenance?
yeah, that kind of stuff that we saw is the stuff that didn't qualify as
irrigation?
like the warm, safe, and dry.
Okay.
Right. So like
Okay.
that kind of stuff that didn't hold to that initial prioritization of, yeah, we need the dry rot repaired, we need the roofs repaired, we need the HVAC, that sort of level of warm, safe, and dry. Things that could fall into the remaining bucket is what the deferred maintenance needs are on this list right now.
Okay.
The district-wide security updates, is that like door hardware? Is that?
Yeah, we're talking a lot about cameras. There's some cameras that need to be replaced. There's some gates and access points that we need to look at and address.
Okay.
It's kind of a catch-all bucket right now because there's a handful of cameras at each campus that we need to repair. So it kind of gets lumped into. We kind of want to roll things up to economy of scale to get to a contractor to say, hey, instead of saying come in and do these 1-2 things, do this district-wide and get it all working and aligned.
Okay, thank you.
And that includes fencing, it sounds like, as well.
I think there's some critical fencing, so like egress and access gates, stuff like that. I mean, you do have ornamental fencing throughout some campuses that we wouldn't put into like the security level. At the primary school, we have the nice little ornamental fences, the low-level fences that need some repair, but they're not elevated to the point of being a security issue.
Okay, thank you.
And again, this isn't your first, and this is your first but not your last chance to talk about these. In the next slides, we'll rank all of them, on a level of ascending importance to you. But we just kind of want to say, hey, of these top things, gut level, what are your top 5 most important? just to kind of start that conversation. And when you've picked your 5, just click submit and your dots show up just like that.
Wow.
And you can start to see how that lays out. There's also a like button in the bottom if you want to just throw out some likes there. It really it kind of encourages me there. There you go. And it'll tell me in the bottom we have 4 responses, so I think we need 1 more coming in there.
It's me.
Oh, take your time. Take your time.
I know.
I have a question while we're finishing, and not to digress too much about security gates and things. How is that determined? Like, it just made me think when you said the primary has a cute little fence. It's certainly not keeping anyone out. Like, at what point do we say we can't have a cute little fence? We have to have something that's for security. I mean, you can step over that little fence or open it, which luckily we live in this wonderful little community, but I'm just curious, when do schools start thinking anybody could walk in our campus? And I'm sorry, I just made me think of how that's determined when we talk about making fences for security.
Typically, we see that at a board level. That starts to be an initiative that the board directs, right? And honestly, that's a district by district decision. We come to some school districts where they say, we want, full 12-foot perimeter fencing with anti-climb chain link fence, and we want to do it all this summer, right? And then we kind of go through that, and we have some that say, no, we want to maintain connectivity to the communities, and these are community access, and we want them open. It is a very tough decision in the state of California, well, in the nation right now, that nobody has the answer to, right? And so sadly, we can't come to you and say, this is what the answer is. It would likely be something that we'd want to talk about and address in a significantly detailed conversation as to here are some of the best practices we see if we want to do this approach. Here are some best practices we see in this approach. There's a lot of conversation that's steered around that, and I think that's definitely something we can do moving forward if we want to. When we have the time, I think it would be good to have those conversations. Largely, it is something that's going to be a 6-month process, I'd imagine, where we start talking about your policies there.
Yeah, I was just curious. I didn't mean we had to get a new meeting on the board.
No, I wish for sure there was an answer, right? I think everybody would love that answer, and if we could all do it, every dollar in the state would go to it right away. But it's going to be something that's based on each community and the threats. So, are we feeling pretty good about this? Is there anybody who'd like?
I just want to. I'm just curious, and I realize this is a board study session, but we also have people at this dais who walk these facilities daily. Yeah. Mr. Flores over there, for example, and so. Does it not make sense to also have their input on this, or is it? I mean,
also, I'd say this is, and you can talk. This is one of many.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure that people,
absolutely,
who have eyes on this and see what happens on a month-to-month basis, that they're also there's definite voice in this.
So just to clarify, you're the first to do this activity on
Okay.
Menti. I have an upcoming business operations committee. They'll be doing the same activity.
Okay.
Mr. Heller and I are doing a budget roadshow at all the sites. This link will be available to all of our staff so that they can also participate. So this is going to go out to
Multi-layers.
everyone.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think this is, and we really like this tool because it's very transparent. At the end, you'll be able to put your email address in, and they'll send you the results.
Okay.
So this will go out to a whole wide group of people, but it starts at the top.
Great.
With
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Do we feel good about this? Does everybody have their answers in?
Yes.
Okay. So the next question we're going to go to is, we're going to run you through every single one of these projects, and the idea being, like, help us understand on a sliding scale of importance, right? what from 1 being not the most important to 5 being extremely important, you should have a little slider there that you can slide up and down and assign a value to it. Now you can go through this and say all can be extremely important, right? You can pin every single one of these over to 5 and all of them can be extremely important. But for us, what we're trying to do is start to make some of those tough decisions to whittle that 21 million down, or at least prioritize that 21 million to know where we start. So if you can help start making some of those decisions saying, hey, this one's a 3, this one's a 5, help us do that, because what's going to happen is then we can start to see which ones we need to prioritize, right? And this is all about, again, going back and just doing that quantifying level check-in of let's get us some hard data to help understand where to start tackling these.
Okay. How did those already get populated like that?
Somebody voted.
Oh, got it. Okay. Oh, I was gonna say, my
There's
goodness.
someone out, like I said, when you get in a room of like motivated problem solvers, these things start popping up like crazy. So. Perfect. I think 6 was our number, so we'll go on to the next set. Same activity. Oh, sorry. That was everybody, right?
I think so, yeah.
I was just going to ask why, so it's someone other than the 5 of us is voting.
Chris is.
Okay, sorry. I just was like, wait a minute, thank you.
So yeah, and then this will be, again, same activity, different set of projects. And again, all can be extremely important, but if you can help us do that ranking, it would be super helpful.
Is the St. Helena, the elementary school deferred maintenance needs, does the restrooms are included in that?
Yes, they are.
Okay, thank you.
Just a question on the St. Helena Elementary School upgrade exterior lighting. So is this lighting for when school is out of session?
Yeah, it's the
Nighttime?
Yes.
Like a
Yeah.
security camera?
We need, the state requires certain levels of lighting for nighttime activities to move to a safe dispersal area in the case of some sort of event.
So if we have a nighttime event,
It's, if you have a nighttime event
Right.
and something happens at a nighttime
A
event, you can
presentation.
safely exit the buildings to a safe dispersal area or the public way.
okay, thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Perfect. We're gonna ask you one more time to go through the ranking for this set of projects as well, and then we'll move on to a different part of the presentation.
For the district-wide clock and bell upgrade, it seems to me that we have done some work on that. And so,
We have done some. Derek, I think Derek just stepped out, but we have done some. We're not completely done with the clock and bell upgrade. Mike, did you want to add to that?
I don't have any knowledge with the bells and clocks.
Because we started that before Mike came on
Right.
board. There he is. Hi, Derek. Derek, can you please give us an update on the clock and bell upgrade? I know we have done some stuff on that.
Yeah, so I think we've spoken about this before, but we purchased some Juno speakers and some licenses to move over to a front row system for the high school and the primary school. We haven't done it yet because there was some other work that needed to be done in order to make that project work a little bit better. The Juno speakers are still in use. They've been deployed to the primary school where teachers can use them as audio enhancement systems, like a pendant mic around their neck, which RLS in the elementary school has used a little bit to amplify their voice so they don't lose their voice during the day. So it had multiple purposes. Those same speakers can also be used to amplify bells, announcements, things like that. The high school is still getting theirs deployed at this time. They haven't been fully finished yet. I would like to do a front row system for the high school and the primary school because we already use it at 2 sites. Secretaries can cross-train each other. If secretaries ever move or shift around, not saying they will, but if they ever did, they would already know how to use the system. But there is some significant work I would want done with the existing speaker system. I would want the analog wiring that's currently going to that repaired because there's some issues with it. We noticed those when we did the project over at RLS where some were kind of chained together, and so one would go out and another one would go out, and so we don't want to have a repeat of that when we move to these other school sites. So, but I'm comfortable with the system that we have at RLS and the elementary school, and hopefully we'll move to that at those other 2 sites.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And on the fire alarm upgrade, I'm under the assumption that all our current systems are working. So we're not running any risk of something not working for any of our sites or this district building. This is simply, it's just age, it's time to upgrade them.
Yeah, the way the state requires you to upgrade fire alarms is you kind of move through to the facilities that you upgrade, you have to upgrade. It's really just kind of bringing up all of anything that's lagging, I guess, to 21st century.
Okay.
There are no gaps. I don't believe in the fire alarm. They're all DSA certified at this point.
Okay.
is my
Okay.
understanding.
Okay, thank you.
And John, you can
I
correct
think
me
you're
if I'm
getting
wrong.
troubles, here and there, and I think weather sometimes has something to do with that in terms of water getting in some of the junction boxes and stuff like that. The new code is a voice evac system.
Okay.
And so when the alarm goes off, you get the audible of,
Okay.
Evacuate the building or fire kind of thing.
Right. Okay,
that
thank you.
don't currently have.
But I think to add to that, Mike and Derek, in full transparency with our Sonatrol and the fire alarm, we have some issues, right? They're intertwined.
Yeah, from the previous install of the Sonatrol system, my understanding is Sonatrol used to be allowed to monitor some of the fire aspects of it. And so there's the chance that there's still some crossover in between those devices. Those devices are so old. That was the other aspect too that I was going to tell you. The new code kind of tells you you have a 10-year lifespan on your devices that are in the field. I don't
Right.
know if you guys know that, but I would imagine most of your devices out there are well past that
Okay.
life expectancy.
Okay. Okay. Trustees, any other questions? No? Thanks, Derek. We'll be sure to time it for the next time you go.
Okay. So the next part of this process is going to be some open-ended questions, right? I mean, we have worked to very diligently wrap our heads around the projects that we wanted you to talk about, but we'd also like some feedback in a way that isn't constrained to what we have in front of you. So we're going to ask you a series of questions, and we'd like any sort of feedback. So in your little display now, you should have a window where you can type up to 250 characters, right? And you can hit next, and you can add as many of these little word bubbles as you want, but as you add them, they'll start to pop up. So we're gonna go through these questions. If you don't have anything that you'd like to put into feedback, please don't feel the need to. We just wanna give you an opportunity to speak so we can actively listen to any of your concerns. There's a handful of kind of guided questions, and some of them will go through technology and safety, and at the end, we'll start to ask you just from your unique perspective, what do we need to be considering? So there's about, I think, 8 to 10 questions. Usually, we just leave them open for a couple minutes and then move on and ask people to wrap up. But please feel free to answer and address this in any way you'd like, and we'll just make sure that we hear it, record it, and sort of document it moving forward. And again, if you run out of characters on your 250, just hit submit, and it'll give you a new line.
Yes. Oh, in the right hand. Above submit, yeah. Yeah, there.
Spend about 5 minutes on that, and we can definitely extend the time if we'd like. If you want to wrap up your thoughts, we have a couple more, so I just want to keep pace. But
We're a bunch, so now you've given us opportunity to just.
and that's what it's here for, right? I mean, like that's one of the things that we're always going to come back with is how many different ways can we connect and listen and hear.
Right.
And this is not your last chance to speak into this. You know, Dr. Vang can use these as a great outline for any future facility conversations you want to have.
Thanks.
But if we want to wrap those up, we'll pop on to the next one. Okay. Does anyone need more time, or can we move on?
Almost done.
Oh, sorry. Take your time.
We're not? Okay. All right. Okay.
Perfect. All right, so we're on to our 6, and we'll move on to the next question. What safety upgrades such as fire alarm systems, security cameras, fencing, and other security measures would you like to see prioritized? You know, again, I think there was a comment there that, you know, I believe we've addressed them. We have had these conversations ongoing, but again, it's a way just to kind of circle back to make sure we hear and are actively listening to your feedback. So if you wouldn't mind kind of putting those in again for us, that'd be great, and we'll look to do another 5 minutes on this question. I just want to note that comment that came in about having an expert do that. That's absolutely valid feedback, right? And definitely this is one of the reasons that we're here. If you do feel uncomfortable in saying, I don't want, I would like to defer my opinion to a list of professionals, or that's definitely some of the things that we're here to help with. Your community is here to help with. We can go find those consultants too. That's an incredibly valid answer. So we just kind of want to make sure that if there's anything on this list that you say, hey, go talk to the legal, go talk to the fire, go talk to that. That's definitely something we'll do. And that's really just as important feedback for us too, to say, hey, okay, now these are things that we need to go, back build and make sure we bring back to you saying, hey, this organization, and these people tell us to do that. And we'll bring that information back to you. And it's really just about kind of understanding what you'd like to see from us to make sure you have that information moving forward. Okay.
Thank you.
I see all 6 of us have chimed in here, so I'm going to move forward unless somebody would like more time. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's true as well. And that's fair feedback too. Like we're saying, we definitely need to prioritize these fencings, but we need to make sure we have a clear plan as to how we want to tackle that as a campus. So that helps us kind of prioritize those projects as well. Are we good, friends? Moving on to the next. Okay. What environmentally friendly initiatives such as solar panels, high energy efficient buildings, or sustainable energy would you like to see prioritized? You guys have been doing a lot of good work with your solar initiatives, but if there's other things that you'd like to see, we want to kind of provide some time to speak into that as well. So we'll open this up for 5 more minutes too, to kind of start talking about some of those initiatives. Thank you for these feedback as well, because now we can start looking at some of the, even this comment about, can you guys provide some energy modeling for the least efficient buildings on campus? We can start doing that kind of work and bring that back to you as well.
Okay.
Oh, geez. And continuing education, that's good too, yeah. How can we look at both the facility but also a user education model?
I have to tell you, the electric buses are a big deal at the primary level, and the kids all go, "Oh, that's an electric bus. It has a green bird on it." So I've been very well educated on the green bird and knowing which one it is. It's the big talk of all the little kids. Very impressed with that.
That's very cool. Very cool. So we're coming up on 5 minutes here, so if we want to kind of wrap up our thoughts and get those last couple things posted up, we'll do that. Maybe look at some sort of joint use or with the school, with the city for buses as well.
She doesn't have to go. Change.
Okay. Are we good if we move forward? Okay. What types of modernization projects should be prioritized to improve classroom learning spaces? When you start looking at like lighting, ventilation, furniture, like what I really want to look at is how, I know we talk a lot about warm, safe, and dry. We know that is an incredible high district priority, but the learning environment, this question is kind of more focused on the learning environment. What you'd like to see, how the students interact with the buildings, how the teachers interact with the buildings, like that kind of level, right? So we're not moving away from the warm, safe, and dry. We're just sort of shifting our focus to classroom level, learning space level discussions. If we want to have any of those conversations, we'll start now, and I'll let you know when we're about 5 minutes in.
I'm just curious, what kind of trends are happening in classroom modernizations right now? I mean, I'll be quite honest. I'm not quite sure what changes have been happening in classrooms in the last couple of years since COVID.
I think that's a very
So currently what we're seeing is moving away from stationary furniture and things that are attached to the wall, and have things that are more furniture that's mobile.
Okay.
And more interchangeable, and being able to change classrooms around to suit the teacher's teaching style.
Okay, great, thank you.
a lot of adaptability in furniture, a lot of adaptability in technology, that kind of stuff. And honestly, if your question is, hey, come do a presentation about what a modern classroom looks like
Okay.
for us, that's a great place to put that comment as well.
Okay.
And that's sort of the point of today, is to make sure that you leave here with a comfortable level of feedback, and we leave here with some pretty clear marching orders as to how to best serve the facility needs moving forward.
Have most of our classroom lighting bulbs, what fixtures and whatnot, have they all been upgraded to LEDs?
No, I'll have Mike chime in. We started
Okay.
this summer over at
Okay.
the middle school with one classroom, but
Okay.
we have a plan.
Okay.
Yeah, that was kind of a trial basis just to see how it was going to work.
Okay.
Obviously, a huge undertaking.
For sure. Yeah.
But as they go out, we're just systematically, as we can do it in-house, we're going to do it in-house.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not is it a thing where like I run into this in my line of work where as fixtures get older, you can't use LED bulbs and fixtures because they're not compatible. So are we running into that problem as well? Okay.
There's actually, you guys could probably speak to it as well, but there is some compatibility that you can do. But you're still using the old fixture, yes.
Sure.
And
Okay.
so at some point that old fixture will die. So
Right.
depending on the circumstances,
Yeah, it becomes
dictates
cost
what we do.
prohibitive to, have to change out transformers and fixtures to accommodate a new LED bulb. And it's, even though it seems like a bigger outlay, it's cheaper in the long run to buy a new fixture than to do.
yeah.
Yeah.
While you're there, you might as well
Exactly.
fix it from
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Thank you.
And we're coming up on 5 minutes here. I think we got some good input, but we just kind of wrap up, and if everyone's ready, we can move on. Okay. Come on. Okay. There we go. What projects for extracurricular and athletics should be prioritized, right? And this, again, we're moving kind of past that warm, safe, and dry. We understand that's a top priority, but if this is really just kind of providing a space to speak into the athletics and the extracurricular activity areas. This could be, obviously the athletics fields and the gyms, but also the theaters, music rooms, any sort of thing that moves beyond a traditional learning environment. So it's not just limited to sports fields, right? So let's make sure we kind of look the big picture for the athletics, the VAPA, the stuff that kind of moves beyond that as well. And again, we understand the top priority is that warm, safe, and dry, but we're really just trying to deep dive where we all fall on all facilities.
That press box at the high school, just so everybody, that's not very old.
Yeah, we did that a couple years ago.
Yeah. So I don't know.
It leaks every time it rains.
Okay.
The new press box? Oh, okay.
Okay. Wow.
Well, we'll definitely.
That sure is.
Yeah, that's something we'll definitely
We'll
look
look-
into.
Yeah, we'll look into that. I wasn't aware.
Sure. And again, thank you for this. I mean, this is why we kind of sit down and have these conversations. So we'll make sure to go through that. Do we feel good about this? I see 6 respondents, so everyone has had their time. Would we like a couple more minutes on this? Okay. We're good to move? All right, so I'll move on to the next one. What shared spaces like libraries, auditoriums, community meeting rooms should be prioritized for renovation or development? If you want, sometimes we'll come into communities and say, hey, we really want to start to see these facilities at our schools for community meeting rooms or something like that. So if there's something you'd like us to kind of start prioritizing, again, in these community shared spaces, please let us know. And this is kind of where we'd have you speak into that as well. I think that's all very valid feedback too, and we can kind of come back and start talking about that as well, kind of moving forward as we start to proactively address those needs. All right, it seems like we have all 6 in, so we'll move forward here to the next question as well. What projects should be prioritized to ensure accessibility for all, the ADA compliance, inclusive classrooms, accessible facilities? I think this kind of comes back to conversations about play areas as well as the Juno systems, where we start talking about, we don't want to just think about barrier removal for path of travel, right? Which I think is where we start to think about ADA in a lot. There's also the Juno systems where we can start saying, hey, here's a voice amplification for some of our hearing impaired students. There's also visual displays for some of that as well. And again, this can be another thing that you say, I might not know enough about this, come back and talk to us some more. We just kind of want to know if there are things on your mind that you'd like us to address. We'll make sure to look into prioritizing those as well. Or if it's something that we need to kind of come back and talk about how the modern classroom removes barriers for learning, we can do that as well. coming up on 5 minutes here too. I think maybe I didn't reset my stopwatch. I don't think I reset there. Okay, I'll see all 6 of us being in. If anyone would like more time. Not? Okay. What resources for teachers and staff should be prioritized to support effective teaching? You know, like updated workstations, professional development centers, those kind of things. If we wanted to start talking about, again, that AV upgrade, we can put that there, or some districts want to start looking at investigating teaching wall solutions. And again, if that wants to roll into that conversation we just had about maybe bringing more information back to what a modern classroom looks like, we can definitely do that as well, in sort of an inclusive package. So if the answer to this is, you know, hey, bundle it with the furniture and come let us know what a modern classroom looks like, we can definitely do that as well. But if there are hot topics that you want to say, hey, you know, I'd really like to start seeing this in our classrooms, that's where we'd like to give you the opportunity to speak into that as well. I think this is all very good feedback, and thank you for that as well. And as Dr. Vang said, this is the first data point of this survey going out to many people, so we will be touching back in with the teachers as well as staff on this as well.
Mine seems to be like frozen, but it's not the end of the world because I see some of my comments are already reflected here, but it won't let me submit.
If you want to refresh and grab a new window, you can.
Okay.
You can.
Did you just refresh? Okay. If I hit the refresh, is it kick me all the way out?
You can come right back to menti.com and use that code again.
Okay.
And it should bring you right back to the same page we're
I'm
on.
not gonna worry about it right now. We'll move on and see what happens.
Okay. Yeah.
Because again, I feel my thoughts are reflected there.
Perfect. So that's 5 then, or we feel like everyone's got the chance to put their thoughts in. Go on to the next one. Let us know if you don't refresh. Is there anything else? So this is kind of just been this open-ended question we're going to ask you to kind of wrap this thing up. Is there anything else that we're not thinking about? Right? We've been talking kind of exhaustively for 6 months, and I'm sure you're like, just get out of here, knucklehead, leave us alone. But if there's something that hasn't been brought, that you don't feel like we've brought to your attention or haven't investigated to the level you'd like us to, this is kind of an open-ended question to kind of just make sure that we're always checking in that we're moving in the right direction. And there's gonna be kind of 2 follow-up questions here for this, but again, just let us know if we're missing the mark on anything so we can kind of come back and supplement that for you as well. And let us know, honestly. I think for the comment that popped up about who's the final decision maker on ranking and priorities, that's always going to come back to the board, right? So what we've started from the beginning is saying that we want to come to you with quantifiable information and recommendations that will always be backed up by a lot of input, right? And ranked in a way that's not just my opinion, but ultimately we will always come back to the board for that prioritization and approval of the projects. You know, you are our leaders, and we'll always check back in with an appropriate amount of information so that you know you can confidently make wise and informed decisions.
I think, Trent, before we move on, John, Mike, and I don't remember if Steve was there, but Derek and I actually had a meeting not too long ago. We were talking about security cameras and other security measures, and I know this is important to us. We spend a lot of time having conversations about this, so I do want Derek to share a little bit about what we've talked about, just so that you're all in the loop about our conversations that we've had, so that you know what conversations are being had by your district staff. Derek?
Hey again. So we've had a couple conversations about security cameras. The project has been, I guess, put off the last couple years. We were going pretty strong on pushing security cameras to the various sites to, you know, make sure our campuses are safe and secure. However, in the last couple years, we've switched over our new cameras from our existing Axis system to our Verkada system. And one of the reasons we started to switch is because they have some more advanced features, and I know I'm going to sound like a salesman, but they have some more advanced features that do some security features that I think are prudent for school districts, given what's going on in the world and in this country, specifically facial detection and weapon detection. I bring this up with my staff all the time when we talk about security. Security isn't just what we're protecting cybersecurity-wise, it's what we're protecting here in the school, and that's our staff and our students. When I look at St. Helena, I look at some of the other schools that have come up in the news in the past, and I see this would be the place. And for me, that's what's made security cameras a higher priority and why it's something that I want here. It's good to talk about fences. I know Mike and I have talked about fences before. But I think we need some kind of rapid detection system that lets local PD and the district know when something is about to happen or possibly prevent it before it does happen. So I don't want to sound too hyperbolic, but it has come up And I don't want this to be a conversation that happens after the fact, God forbid. It should be something that we should be proactive about. I know there's a lot of other projects. I'm sitting there reading through HVAC and, safe, clean, dry classrooms, but I just don't want that to fall by the wayside. We've been doing a lot of work on that. We've been doing a lot of work on where they should go, where we would add, what systems we need. Mike's been working on, access control for our building. So I just want that to be something the board keeps in mind as we move forward with these conversations.
We're actually also working to get a quote from a security consultant that'll come and do an assessment of all of the facilities. That'll be for the fencing. They'll review sort of the ingress and egress, go over with Kay and the team as far as what some of the concerns are. Verkada cameras are one of the things that we have been talking about, and we're putting them in a lot of school districts right now because they do have some new AI technology in license plate readers and stuff like that. So I think we need to get the assessment done, and then we'll be able to bring that back to you with some recommendations and your input.
I know I appreciate the work you've done on that so far, and thank you. You just answered my, well, then what are next steps? So next steps is just what you explained, and then we'll hear about it.
Yeah, we potentially have a meeting today with them about it. If Kay and I can get on the same schedule, but yeah.
And when,
Sorry. Oh, go ahead. You were first.
That's okay.
You talked first. Go ahead.
when we have the cameras and that, who maintains that? Then who is watching? You picture that room where there's 20 cameras and some security guards in there. Like, how does that play out?
Well, so for the old system right now, it's a lot of just go back through and look through footage, unfortunately. But with this system, they actually have a team that can sit there and watch it for us. And then because of some of their detection methods, if they notice something is going on that shouldn't be happening, they can alert PD, local PD immediately, as well as the district. So
that's like an off-site
yes,
company.
absolutely.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, and it's easier for us to, it's easier for us to get in there and look at it, but it's difficult because we are so small to have somebody dedicated to watching the security cameras all day. This is one of their big selling points, is that somebody is maintaining, watching your cameras at all times.
I was just going to say that it definitely falls in the safe category for me, but I guess I didn't, in our project list, it doesn't come across as a project. So I guess my larger question, I think I even wrote it, is feels like we have projects that pop up that we didn't know. Mm-hmm. So the Rudd building was in there, and now there's a security project, and I'm having a hard time. I know this is always going to happen, but that's where we're going to have to come be like, all right, this is what we know, this is what we're going to prioritize and how we'll fund it, and then we have projects that just pop up. So we're going to... I feel like we're going to have a tough job of like, do we have to maintain a certain dollar amount for this? Oh God, I've got to fund that now.
So we'll pop back to that list, and that district safety and security is an itemized line item there. So if we want to kind of come back and tackle that, that's what we're coming to. And I can kind of start to feel the frustration we've been looking at these same lists for 6 months. What we're getting to now is bringing back projects for recommendation. And on that list and on that top item is that district security measure. And so if that's something you'd like us to come back with next month and say, hey, we'd like to assign $1.5 million to this, we certainly can start doing that. That's where we've come to in the process. And I know, like we said, we've cast a big net. We've whittled that net down from 83 to 21 million. We're now trying to whittle that net down from 21 million to how are we going to spend our 4 million, right? And so we've constantly been constricting this, and we've done some really big constrictions, right? We've taken 83 million down to 21. We're taking 21 million down to 4. And on that list is definitely that district-wide security item that's been kind of floating around with us the whole time. And so we'll pop right back into this. After this survey, we're going to go right back to that list and kind of start having a finalized thoughts about, now that we sort of worked through this exercise, we've kind of got our brains going, we're going to come back and start having to make those really hard prioritizations, because one of the things we have to do leaving this room, or very soon, is give clear direction on, we have $4 million, we have 21 in need. How do we do that final line? Because then what happens is Kay's going to come back for authorization to do the projects. We're going to execute those projects, and we're going to actively move forward. So that's kind of where we are with this whole process. We have one more slide, and then we'll get right back to that list that takes us from that 21 to the 4.
So I guess I just want to touch on that. So there was slide 8 on your presentation, district-wide facility needs, and there was an upgrade security systems for 1.65 million.
Mm-hmm.
1,650,000, I'll say that differently.
Yeah.
So that is inclusive of this?
It's my understanding that
There might be new things that are coming out of it, though, it sounds like, if there's new meetings.
My understanding is the 1.65 covers the request that we have for the cameras. If you want to start saying, I'd like to look into having a holistic discussion of whether or not to enclose our campuses with fences, that would be something, that is not something that we currently have, but if you want us to start exploring that, we can. Currently, we are working on fulfilling the requests that we have from the district.
So what you just spoke about is in the project we talked about today?
Yeah, how it's been explained
Okay,
is when
thank
we were
you.
addressing security.
That's what I wanted to
It's-
make sure. It sounded like it was something new that maybe wasn't on there.
No,
Okay,
no,
thank
it's
you.
falling under that.
Sorry, I
yeah.
misunderstood.
Yeah, no, that's exactly why we're here, and that's why I'm so grateful that you showed up for a workshop instead of a presentation, right? Because we can kind of deep dive some of that stuff. That's really the beauty of that, and that's how we understand that 1.65.
I do want to clarify that when we do enter into a contract for an assessment with Newcomb Boyd is who we're talking to right now, they will include fencing, cameras, and an assessment of those weak points at each of your facilities. So it won't just be limited to the cameras for that.
So then with the 1.65, is the offsite place with us watching the cameras all day, is that part of this 1.65 or is that another contract?
My understanding is there's an operational contract for the system, so there'd be a construction. And stop me if I'm wrong. There's the cost to construct and install the system, and there's a monitoring cost that goes along with it. But
Our costs include the cameras, the licensing, an in-house monitoring, but not a contract to monitor it outside. And that's, I think, a decision that we need to get deeper down the road for the board to make that decision on how that's going to work.
And what is usually the expense of an outside contract to monitor?
I don't have those figures. It's not something that I think we've had an outside vendor do at any of the districts we've worked
Okay.
on to date.
Okay, great, thank you.
this is going to be kind of wrapping up this whole presentation. Is if you feel like you've been able to say everything into the space that you have, this sort of our catch-all, just from your unique perspective as a community and school leader, what should we be considering? You are actively out there talking to your community. If there's information that you'd like to bring back to us, this is really just an open-ended catch-all question. If you feel like you've said all of your piece, you don't have to put anything here. We just wanted to provide one more check-in before we left this survey and returned back to that prioritization activity that we'll get back to. And I thank you all for your help here. I don't think anyone came knowing that they'd be writing an essay, but you've all done a wonderful job. So thank you for that. We'll give you about 5 more minutes, and then we'll jump back to that.
After we wrap up this, we'll take a 5-minute comfort break if we could, please.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So just to be conscious of time and making sure we move through all the material we got today, if we want to wrap up our comments on here, we're approaching 5 minutes. And again, this is not the last chance you have to speak into it. We can use this as a template for any further discussions with Dr. Vang moving forward about facilities as well. Yeah, I really like the idea of a sort of a yearly check-in at least. It obviously doesn't have to be extensive as what we've done the last 6 months, but definitely a check-in to make sure that we're adhering to a plan and the idea that we have that really clear facility plan. Okay. Does everybody have their input in? Okay. So that's a thank you. We appreciate your input. We're going to finish this. You're going to get a prompt on the next slide. You can put your email address in there. They will email you a copy of this so you have all the input. Again, this is just kind of as we start saying, hey, as a high level of transparency, you will have that in your back pocket. And again, thank you for this. I know it's kind of been a long exercise, but really the idea is to just make sure that everybody walks from this experience saying I had a significant amount of input to provide, and then we'll take the break and jump back into the rest of the presentation.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for your
We're just
Question
going to,
on, if we put in our email address, we get the results from today, will we also be able to see the results when other people use it?
So we're going to break this up, and so we'll do one presentation for today. We'll start to have other presentations.
Yep.
Those will be, Dr. Vang will have all of those. It will.
we
Your
could
email
get
will not be
those?
bombarded every time somebody takes it. You will just get the results from your time. But we will be collecting the results of different presentations, as well as if we open this up to a survey and say, hey, this thing can be open for 2 weeks. We'll close it at the end and make sure you get all of those results as well.
So I guess my ask is, would we be able to see these types of results for the other times? Like you mentioned a roadshow and business ops. It'd just be useful for us going back to who decides, how do we prioritize? I don't know what I don't know, so.
right.
Thank you.
I mean, whether we summarize it or provide access to the responses, something like that, would that work for you as well? Okay.
That's a really nice part about this tool is it's incredibly transparent. We'll have
Yeah,
those
that's
summary,
great.
We'll have those summary reports from every single time we
Okay.
run it. So feel free to put this in. That will get you yours specifically, and it includes all of the feedback. And
Oh,
then
great.
We'll make sure that Dr. Vang has summaries
Okay.
of these at all critical milestones.
Okay, thank you. We'll take a 5-minute break. It's 10:37, so let's try and get back here and get going at 10:45 at the latest. Okay. Thank you. on? Am I back on? I'm back on. Okay, we will resume our presentation here. So, Trent, feel free to take it away.
Hey, so I think where we're at right now is kind of what that comment was about. Hey, we've been looking at the same list for 6 months. So we got to start doing something about it, right? And that's what we've been trying to do. We've been talking a little bit with the community. We've been talking with Dr. Vang. We've been looking at this list, and that's how we got here. Currently, we have $4.8 million of total project to spend. You can see that we're still at $21 million. We're going to use some of the input you gave us today, right, to help us cut down that $21 million to about $4.85 million. I can stop to have any conversations you'd like about that right now. That is going to be a bit of an undertaking, but we're going to do that with the information we received from you today, as well as the information that we have from our other industry specialists, and we're going to bring back to you a recommendation of projects to move forward. And again, I'll pause right now if there's any other feedback you'd like to put in there. Again, we just want to make sure that you feel heard and that you felt that your input has been considered while we build that prioritization list, that final list for upcoming summer.
Okay, trustees?
I would just like to say thank you very much, because it was something that was important to me to be able to prioritize as our,
Yes.
as the trustees. So thank you, and thank you for doing that. I appreciate that.
We have been anxious to prioritize.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
It doesn't
thank
look
you.
good, but it.
It's a process, right? We've been talking about it, and I know it's exhausting. And like I said, I know you're probably down with me popping up here, but we are getting to the point where we're making wise decisions. We are going to start making informed decisions, and you can definitely leave these knowing you've made informed decisions with as much input as we can give you.
Okay.
And so thank you for that. And we're going to bring back a list of projects that we'd like you to consider,
Okay.
and that's going to help us kind of start moving through that. Okay. Following up again, kind of on Prop 2, we had a little bit brief discussion about that. There's kind of two questions floating around that we wanted to address. First of all, what is Prop 2? It's a $10 billion general obligation bond, right? And that's going to get earmarked for K-12 public education, for public schools. It is the way that the state is proposing to fund school construction for the next couple of years. If it passes, that's great. It'll put a bunch of money into the pot that we talked about being empty right now. And then I guess there's some conversations about, does it really, will it come to us? Will it affect us? And yes, very much. The state bond money is available to all public school districts, regardless of how they're financed, regardless of how they fall into a demographic or socioeconomic window. All public school districts will be eligible for it. You are eligible for it, and you are currently in line for about $11 million of that $10 billion. So if it passes, it'll take a while, right? The wheels of the machine will pick up again with some new cash in its reservoir, but you are in line for $11 million, and that will work its way towards you. And then we will be able to put it towards new facility goals and start taking down that $21 million as much as we can. All right? We can stop it. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Will that funding come in one lump sum?
I don't know how that'll get cut. And I can talk to April.
Yeah, it's. I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens next week. But
Yeah.
just would be curious if it's one pot, if it's do we get reimbursed? Is it going to be that kind of system, or
So you are in line. It is that first in, first out. And so what they do is they'll take tranches to the state allocation board, and
Okay.
they'll say, pay all of these,
Okay.
then pay all of these. You may be in one big group, or you may
Okay.
not. I think it's really how they receive those applications. And we can definitely talk to April about
Okay.
when you'll see those. It's kind of like Monopoly money. It just shows up, and it's like, hey, you did this 5 years ago. This thing has finally shown up. But we can definitely get April. If the bonds pass, I'll have her update when you can expect to see that, and she'll be able to put those all online, because there is a huge database of the state that has them all laid out.
Okay, thank you.
And now, this would be in addition to the modernization and eligibility.
This is your So this is your
Okay.
past modernization eligibility that you've already done all the good work for, and we're just kind of waiting in line to get it paid out. You've already fronted all of that money. You've already paid for all of those projects. It's the state putting in their share. About 6 years late.
Okay, so then my question is so then, if it doesn't pass, then because we're looking at the primary school and elementary school specifically because modernization eligibility, but if it doesn't pass, then we're not going to get anything for modernization eligibility for primary school and elementary school.
We'll just keep getting you in line, and that 11 million will grow to 15 million, will grow to 17 million, and eventually,
As long as it passes in
Yeah.
the future.
eventually, they'll talk about like it's not if, it's when, and Californians will decide, if hey, we're paying too many taxes, we don't want to deal with this. They may find an alternative mean, but at this point, this is the one vehicle the state has to pay for school facilities.
Okay,
And your number will just keep growing that they owe you, and
Okay.
eventually the check will come.
okay. Right, thank you.
I have a quick question because I got lost. Not surprising. When you said that this money, it's for projects we've already done, we've already done the workforce, so are we just taking this money, paying ourselves back, or is this money we can, I'm lost on that.
So you have paid the full price for all of these projects, right? They are now paying their share, or they will if the bond passes, and you'll get a check for, or multiple checks for about $11 million. Those will go to pay for future facility needs. I believe they are restrained to just facilities, so you can't take them and do other things with them. They need to go to pay for facilities. Yeah. And I think that's really the motivation here. Like, we can only educate as a school district, right? We can't take political positions, but as an education point, you are in line for 11 million of that 10 billion, and that's definitely something that will start to come back to you. You have been approved for it. You are in line. That is a check that will show up from the state if Prop 2 passes.
I think it has a pretty good likelihood of passing. There
going
wasn't a lot of opponents, in the rebuttals against. There wasn't, so, we'll see.
Will some of that pot go to the modernization of the RLS field? I remember there was conversation about that when we were discussing.
I don't think at this point RLS has modernization eligibility, but what we can do is when it does,
Yeah,
they can go back and get it in, I think, a couple of years. And we'll talk to April.
that's
about
right. That it was going to be a couple of years.
Yeah.
Remember.
You-
Okay.
You kind of wait and then you go backwards and you kind of go frontwards.
Okay.
This is me speaking way out of my element. I will say, though, you have some of the best school facility planners in King Inc., and they are by far some of the best in the state. So they'll be able to make that work for you, and we can get April back out to have that conversation as well.
Great.
But you are definitely doing everything in your power to be wise about that and getting in line for all of that funding.
And so remind me, so was this bond, it was on the ballot in 2000, is that correct?
No, it's coming up next week.
No, but we had a previous one that didn't pass, is
Oh
that
yeah,
correct?
that was 13 a couple of years ago. It was tied to Prop 13, so everyone thought it was going to readjust their property values. So Prop 13 is way back. It was the prop that kept everyone's property values tied, right? And so then the state bond 2 years ago, I believe, was Prop 13 again, because they just sort of recycled the numbers. And then everyone thought it was going to readjust their property values, and it just got destroyed. So the state actually said nothing else can be Prop 13 moving forward.
Okay.
So, it's such a highly divisive prop number that you can't use it anymore. So now we're Prop 2, and it's going to be very similar in structure. But hopefully this one will pass, and we can get that $11 million, because then that would kind of, that would that could help us aggressively attack that 21 million that we need to start looking at.
Right, okay, great, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. This is the part where we want to start talking about me kind of asking you for some more money. So this will be the uncomfortable portion of today's presentation. But we want to start doing this. $3 million is what you currently put into the from the general fund into this. I am asking you to consider, and I'm not asking you to take any action on this, but to consider increasing that to $5 million in the coming years, right? We have seen and outlined a need for $80+ million of facility needs. We have seen and outlined an immediate need for $21+ million. And when we look at $3 million, kind of what it brings you is about, if we equally spread that $3 million, and just kind of an idea of cost per square footage, equally spread that $3 million across all of your campus square footages, you're putting about $11.40 per year towards maintaining those. And that kind of gets us back to some of the discussions we had with the boards in front of you, is why does it cost so stinking much, right? You'll see that $11.40 per square foot doesn't get you a whole lot, right? Those costs today that you see there are going to go up if the bond passes. So what I'd really like to do when we start talking about the future is look at possibly increasing that contribution from $3 million to $5 million. We can kind of back build that some more if you want, but it is definitely one of the things that I'd like you to consider, because we're going to see continued increase, right? One of the things that we see is an annual increase in these costs, right? They never ever go down. The best we can hope for is 1% to 2%. You will see on the right the historical rate increases based on the states, the California, this is from DGS, California's construction cost index. That comes down from the state. Those are the cost increase expectations, and you can see from over 21, 22, 23, we're up over 30% in those 3 years alone. Typically, you'd see something around 3 to 4%, which was what we saw in 17 and 16, again in 19 and a little bit in 2020. But those costs, 21, 22, 23, they're not going to come back down. And so what happens is your $3 million, if we stay at $3 million, erodes. Right? Every single year you can do less and less with it. This is just the construction costs. We also have other costs to consider for our facilities, like the maintenance cost, the operation cost. But this number, right, this annual increase based on inflation comes down from the state, and it really doesn't encompass all of the costs, but it's a really good indicator of how that's going to rise, right? So what I'd like you to do, and this is where my ask would get a little bit more, right, is if you could come along and increase to 5 million, I'd also like you to consider an annual increase based on inflation. Right? And this is where please don't run me out for it. But if we say, hey, we've been doing 3 million for a couple of years, we need to look at upping this. I would highly, highly encourage you to stop every year at this annual check-in about facilities and say, John, what does the construction cost index look like for the year? And he'll say, great news, it was only 5%, or he'll say, oh no, it was 15%. But it's a way to help protect your purchasing power and make sure that we're kind of always doing our best to equalize that number every single year. I know those are two really big asks, but I'd like to put those out, at least start the conversation. You can run me out of town, but I think it's a really good idea to start thinking about. We've had that 3 million set fairly statically for a couple of years, and we've just watched that erode, that sort of purchasing power erode fairly significantly over the last 3 to 4 years. So I'd like to talk about a one-time bump. But every year I'd also kind of like to come back and say, hey, how is this thing adjusted? Okay, it's gone up 10%. So are we comfortable saying, okay, now we've lost 10% of our purchasing power, or should we come back through and make sure that we maintain that commitment to making sure we kind of proactively attack those costs that we have?
So I just had a couple questions, being a newer board member. The 3 million, I guess going back a slide, this is a yearly amount?
Yeah.
School year amount. So it would be 5 million set aside going forward as a proposal.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition, taking into account growth year over year.
I would like you to,
Yeah.
and I know that's a huge
that makes
ask.
sense. But
Yeah.
how long have we been at 3 million? Do you know?
In our budget assumptions, it's been there. For the last, going back prior year, I came in last year, so even the year before that and the year before that. So it looks like
At least 4 years?
Yeah, from what I can see.
Okay.
So, Dr. Vang, is that the set-aside fund then?
That is the set-aside funds. It's actually, if you look at our budget assumptions, it's actually 2 million for deferred maintenance, and then it's like, it's 2 million for deferred maintenance, and then 3 million in other things. And if you look at the other items, in fact, Trent, if you plug in,
Yeah. I'm gonna unplug now.
Okay, that's interesting.
So here's our budget assumptions. And if you, this is in our, in my first interim, second interim budget development, you'll always see our budget assumptions in there. And towards the end, you'll see the fund balances, the assigned set-asides, and when you look at the SACS forms that I present, and that's in the board packet, you'll see that there's a set-aside in there. And so if you look, it's actually 2 million for deferred maintenance, but then there's also 3 million other items. And so, for example, if you look at technology infrastructure, we've been doing a lot of that work. So there's that 300,000 that we can pull from. There's also Ready Future classrooms. There's all these additional items that we've been tapping in, that we can tap into, because we've been addressing these along the way. So that's where the 3 million comes from. It's from the 5 million set aside. So that set aside is not part of the it's in addition. It's separate from the reserves.
Right. So, but if we're taking 3 million from the set aside, and then that set aside account will then go down to 2 million.
Yes.
So it's not like we're contributing 3 million every year to that.
No,
So we'll be down then to 2 million, and then we're asking for another 2 million each year.
You lost me.
Well, so I thought so it sounded like when we were talking that we were setting aside 3 million every year to add on to this account, but it's not. It's a total of $5 million right there. So we take 3 million from that, we'll have $2 million left in our set aside account. Is that correct?
Yes, so that's our budget set aside. That's different from reserves.
Right, right.
So all those items right there are totaling $3 million.
5 million.
That they're all those are total. Oh, there it is. Okay, thank you. I was like, I'm not coming up with 5 million. Like,
So if you took away the first row, which was 2 million for reserves, that's our 3 million.
thank you. I just was like,
Okay.
I didn't see
Sorry.
the second page, so that's okay.
Apologize. So there's a second.
So it is
there's
our
another
3 million.
page.
All right. Okay.
So basically, if we go back to this, the request is that first row should be, sorry. We're not talking about deferred maintenance, the 2 million. We're talking about increasing all the other rows to add up to a total of 5. It's 3,
It's 3
but it wants to
plus,
be 5.
and we need 2 more. So this would become 5 total for that top row.
Okay.
So, and I'm speaking now specifically about the increase of 2 million to the 5 million. So how does that look to our, with our budget? Because we're already pretty squeezed in our budget.
That's a conversation that we need to have because we're going to need, it's going to have to come from somewhere, right? It's either going to have to come from the bottom line from reserves, or it's going to have to come from our budget expenses. So where it comes from, that's a decision that the board will need to help me make.
So with that, are you asking for us to agree on 5 million going forwards today, or do we have some time so that we can make this discussion?
We're not making
We're not
any
making
decisions
decisions.
today. Today, we're throwing this out so you have some time to digest this and look through all the documents and think about how we want to proceed so that we can address our facilities needs moving forward.
And I think those historical rates, given if that also, that proposition passes on the minimum wage,
We're going to go up.
that's gonna, it will, I mean, aside from materials, that's really gonna impact labor.
I think that's, and the nice thing is that is from the state. They publish it every single year. There's no, again, this is always, we're always trying to fight back. Please don't take my opinion forward in your decision making. Let's always go back to solutions that are published, that are vetted, that are provided to us from experts. That is something we can go get every single year from the state of California to say, this is something that has been published. This is outside of this, and we can take that as trusted information as it reflects across the industry.
So then if we did do the annual increase, annual increase, how much would that be? How much of a set aside would that be? How much more would that be for us? Would it be 9.4% of 5 million, or?
Well, it sounds like it was based on inflation as well, which was recommended, like we would consider an annual increase based on inflation and other, I guess, like, the cost index for.
But so we would say, basically that would come out of we would say 9.4% coming from our general fund will be just pushed right into the facilities.
Yeah.
So just like, if you go back a slide 21 maybe, where it's the recommended contribution increase, basically every year that would change based on the published rate for the previous year or
So,
something.
and kind of how I'm seeing this is,
Does that make sense?
we need to catch up.
Yeah, right.
Right. So we started at 3 million, and slowly that money has been eroded. So I'm asking, can we do a catch-up payment that would take us to 5 million, and then next year, I think, and John's looking at this right now, I think it comes out in February. They'll say, hey, last year adjusted 8%. Okay, so now we'd come to the board and say, as we've discussed and as we've planned, last year the CCI increased 8%. We'd like to change this to X percentage, and you'd say, yes, that's consistent with the decisions we've made in the past, and we'd look at how that budget balances out. So we're kind of doing one catch-up, and then moving forward, it would be the tweak based on the state rates.
I'm curious to know, and this is not to get too sidetracked, but because the construction companies are obviously dictating this when you're, like you're saying, a bond or a proposition passes. So do our legislators work for the benefit of people? I mean, it just kind of seems like they're able to willy-nilly do what they want to do.
Well, and I don't want to. I definitely don't want the message to come out from today that our contracting partners are taking.
Gouging is.
Yes.
Right. That is definitely not, what happens in anything in our economy is when the supply and demand curve gets so
Okay.
bloated, it naturally offsets, and that's everything from the trucking companies, the supply companies.
Okay.
The entire economy is going to reset to this. The entire economy has adjusted to the stimulus package. The one thing that should definitely not come out of this is that our contracting partners are abusive, or they're
Thank
trying to
you.
deal with the exact same challenges,
Okay.
right? They're going, hey, this piece of material that I bought used to cost me 30% less. Right. And so it's not like they're sitting outside going, haha, we can't wait to take advantage. They're dealing with the exact same challenges. They are working with integrity to keep it as low. It's just how the economy
Sure.
operates when stimulus gets put into it.
Okay.
And Prop 2 is going to be a very large stimulus. It's $10 billion
know.
pushed into one very specific sector.
Okay.
Right. So
Thank you for that, because
it's-
it was feeling a little personal, I guess.
No,
for,
yeah, no,
for
that's-
school districts, because it's like,
It just is,
Yeah.
and there's just open volume, and so there's a limited amount of people who can do this work in a qualified, skilled way, and so when every single district gets, and that's kind of like because it's not being released, because the bonds have been failing and they haven't been sort of systemically releasing this, everyone has a big backlog. And so that the people who we would recommend as qualified, competent contractors are in incredible demand because all of a sudden there's a significant amount of cash in the market. So it's going to be these things that sort of move and flow. Like we would not expect to see 13 to 9 to 10%, but that is the market sort of adjusting to the stimulus money put in through COVID, right? And so we're hopeful that will constrict some back down to this 3 to 4, 5% that we normally see. But it's just taking into account what happened on a very large economic scale.
yeah, okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah.
But I think I guess to reframe your question is, the constant is, why is education construction so much more expensive than any other construction? So that's the legislative side of it.
Yeah.
Not,
Well, I think
not
we can.
this, but yeah.
Remember, we talked,
I know,
and
but-
we'll bring those slides back. You're building the second safe buildings in America.
I know.
And it's like, it's just one of the things. There's an incredible amount of oversight, and there's an incredible amount of testing that goes into it. But it's really one of these buildings that just can't fail.
No, totally
Yeah,
get it.
So it's
And-
really tough.
And that will be the messaging on
Yes.
the roadshow and to
Yes.
inform all of our staff, so we're all on the same page. Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you.
And we definitely have one of those slides of why does it cost so much? Why does it take so long? And we'll take that out and
Okay.
explain that to everybody as well.
Put it in bold red.
Yeah. It's when everyone really likes me.
Jeannie?
Sorry, could
Okay.
you tell?
Yeah.
So then, so with this, we have not yet discussed the expense of kind of our solar project. So where does that come from?
That's what we're going to talk about right now, coming up next. So that's going to be 3 items that's on the agenda, 3 current projects that we need to discuss.
Okay. Okay, everybody ready to move on? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you for that lead-in, Trustee Kerr. So on your board agenda, there are 3 current projects that I need to bring up to you today so that come the November board meeting, this won't be a shocker, hopefully, and that you'll have an idea of how much each of these projects will cost. And so I'm going to start with the solar project first, and that's why Gopal is here, because he is helping us take the lead on the solar project. And I have a high-level estimate of $1 million that we need to set aside for this project. But I'm going to hand over to Gopal because there are nuances, there are things that you need to understand. So, Gopal?
Is it working? Yes. Yes, so this should not cost $1 million. This is just a contingency fund that's being set aside. So if you, again, a refresher, this is meant to be a project that is paid for entirely by somebody else. And all you will be doing once a project is built and interconnected is paying for the electricity that it produces. But the contractor had some exclusions in there. For one example is they were expecting that the district would already have a geotechnical report, for instance. And so that's an exclusion. They weren't going to chop down any trees that needed to be chopped down, etc. So then Steve went and made a long list of all possible things that would pop up as contingencies. And so I asked the contractor to reach out to the financier to say, just hypothetically, suppose the cost of the project went up by $200,000 from whatever you've budgeted for. How would that affect the PPA rate? And we got a very, I think, little abrupt response from the financier, who said, you have already been underwritten for the certain budgeted amount. And what they're waiting, there's a slight digression, what they're waiting for is, even though St. Helena seems to have passed all their credit checks and so forth, they won't finance this project in isolation. They're looking for other projects to bundle it with, then go present to an investor, and then the funding will come through. So given that the project has been underwritten for a certain amount, he said, well, this may delay projects. So we've backed off and said, no, this is just a hypothetical question. But regardless, once a project is underway, we will discover things that we just didn't, there may be, they've made some assumptions about the trench path from the solar array to the point of interconnection. Well, it may be difficult because there's all kinds of underground utilities that they need to avoid. So there will be adjustments that need to be made. When it's time to make those adjustments, we'll see how difficult it is going to be to ask the financier to just include those costs in there. And we'll see what the resulting PPA rate increase is. And if it's an allowable cost for the tax basis, it will make sense to push it over to them, because then you get the indirect benefit of the 30% of tax credit that you otherwise would be just paying for out of pocket. So my recommendation to Kay was, given the numbers that Steve has come up with, just in the worst case, expect that you'd have to spend that money. But the more likely case, you won't have to. And once a project gets, all the numbers get reconciled during the project, then that money can be set aside to spend on the other long list of items that you have. But it needs to be set aside just for now.
So it sounds like it's like unforeseen expenses then, like change orders. and stuff.
Typically there are no change orders on my projects, and the reason is they bid for something and we know exactly what, but they have assumptions in there. So for instance, one of the changes that we've already made is we've talked to the city of St. Helena about the array at RLS. And that's the city's property, that's the school district's property, but the city wanted to have the area surveyed and said, well, we want some kind of an agreement, because even though it's outside of the school district's fence line, there's a public sidewalk. And so we've said, okay, what happens if we don't encroach over the sidewalk? They said, well, in that case, you don't have to go through any. So, but that's changed the original configuration. It's made the arrays skinnier and longer. That will potentially cause the price to go up. There's some trees that are being chopped down there. Those weren't included in their original budget. So those kinds of things. Yeah. All legitimate. No change orders yet.
Okay, and to add to that, Chris and I have been talking about this. Gopal and I, we've actually had a discussion. The renderings, the most recent renderings of where the solar panels will be located are completed. We share them at the last Business Ops Committee meeting. I think that the solar panels themselves at all the sites will be fine. I think the only one that is really kind of out there where the public can really see it is over at the middle school. And so in our discussion, if the board is in agreement, I think it would be wise of us to hold a community meeting to ensure that the community knows where these solar panels will be located at each of the sites. So it's not a surprise when we start our construction projects and then these solar panels go up. So what we had discussed was holding the community meeting on Tuesday, December 17th at 5 p.m., either here or in the PAC. But prior to that, at the Business Ops Committee meeting, we would share this information with the Business Ops Committee so they can get the word out. And then at our board meeting, our December board meeting, we would also share this out publicly so that the public, everyone knows that there's going to be a public meeting for the community so that they would, have firsthand knowledge and hear directly, not only from Gopal, but from the contractor. We would have the contractor present so that there were questions that we couldn't answer that the contractor would be able to answer. But I think it's important to get in, in front of it and let our community know what's going on.
Yeah, and just one more piece to add to that is we've asked the contractor to put on posters the 3D renderings. So each of the school sites will have theirs, in the office or something that people can walk by and look at before the community meeting on the 17th of December.
That's great. I totally applaud the idea of the community meeting and outreach. Do you think it has any benefit to actually holding it on site at RLS if this is the campus that maybe have the most neighborly input since they're the most visible? Because I'm just wondering if people, it's always beneficial to be on site to know what you're talking about. And it's important for all of it, but I just something for maybe the staff to consider.
We actually talked about that, our Business Ops Committee, and that's what they had, what the committee had recommended. However, in speaking with Principal Ryan and just looking at the facilities, the available facilities over at RLS, it may be harder to accommodate if we have a big turnout, a larger turnout. So that's why we were going back and forth. Do we hold over there? Should we maybe hold over here where there's more space? So we actually had this discussion with our administrators. We can go either way. We were just thinking more about facilities. Chris, did you want to chime in?
Just the potential of more, we didn't want people to be excluded if we tried to conduct it in the RLS library, for example, and we had 150 people attend, and then we wouldn't be able to accommodate everybody that wanted to come in. So we were just thinking what space would have the most potential for us to have a larger meeting if needed.
Okay.
And maybe you schedule a potential walkthrough, for anyone that's still after the meeting, or put that out there, because I know you need more meetings to go to, Kay, but maybe on such and such date at 3:00, for those who really want a closer look, we will have a walkthrough at RLS or something. Just give another option, maybe.
And the 3D renderings that Gopal had referred to earlier, we're going to have those available, and after our meeting, we're going to have those at the sites in the front office. So that will be available to the community members as well.
And then perhaps even a invitation through the paper or something like that, because obviously community, if you don't have kids in the district, you're not going to get any communication or messaging from us. So
That's what I was going to ask. I know we have Monrovia for communication between city and district, but I'm wondering, does someone from the district actually go to public comment at a community meeting?
that can happen.
Because that, right, isn't that like a forum where we have
But we'll circle back with staff on that, because maybe as with Dr. McClay coming on board as well, and that might be something that we can direct staff to help promote that. Okay.
And Spanish translation?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And then the next project is our EV bus infrastructure project. I will hand over to Steve and to John and Gopal. I know you've had some help in this too.
Stay.
So the EV charging stations, the project really breaks down into two parts. We have the part that the district is doing and responsible for, and then we have the part that PG&E is responsible for. PG&E has to change out the transformer that's existing, and that's at the end of the facilities building. And that is going to accommodate the future solar as well as the charging station. So that'll be one-time change. There will be an interruption in power. We'll have to shut things down for a day for that to make the turnover. After that, they will energize, PG&E will energize the new equipment, and then the chargers in their final location will be able to be utilized for charging the buses. In this process, there's also all of the grant money that comes in for offsetting the costs, as well as PG&E rebates, and we're kind of really sorting through most of those numbers. We have, I think, 3 numbers that are pretty solid, but we have other numbers that should be coming in to help offset that. So, and then when we break it down into what the district is responsible for, we have the hard cost, which is the construction cost, and then we have the soft cost, and then the price of the buses, and then PG&E's rebates, and then we have some money in there allocated for legal expenses to review contract documents and go through that process. So in general, we are still in flux with the actual price peg, because we have some money coming back also on the GCCI contract for chargers, and so it's still moving around. Also in the construction costs, we have $175,000 allocated for the new sliding gate system, and also temporary connection for the bus charging while the rest of this construction is going on, and PG&E finally energizes the system. Then we can move the other chargers for the bus over. The 175 is still also up in the air, because we have a design from Strata Architects that they put together. Currently, GCCI is the contractor. They are pricing it and have not given us a final cost on what that gate will cost. So we have adjustments for that also. If the gate becomes too expensive, we can make it shorter and make the opening shorter. But currently, it's about 40 feet in width. So that gives the buses plenty of room to back up and align with the chargers. So makes it much easier for the drivers where we're at right now. Any questions on actual dollars or?
We wouldn't want to make those fences shorter, though, if the bus needs the space to back in, right? So that.
Correct.
So, okay.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't seem like a realistic solution to even consider making that a shorter opening if we need the buses to get in there, right? That's what I'm understanding. Okay.
Reason I say that is because there is a threshold for when the gate gets longer and longer, it gets heavier.
Okay.
And so when it gets heavier, you have to increase the motor size and a couple
Sure.
other things that go with it. And if you shorten it up a little bit, I'm not talking about drastically down to 20 feet, but
Okay.
something less. Then
Got it. Okay.
Motors and things get into play there.
Thank you for that clarification.
So right now, the estimated cost, the high-end cost, the set aside, as you can see on the agenda, it says TBD, but our rough estimate is close to $1 million as well.
And is this something that is imminent? I mean, is this something that you said you had to shut off power? Is it something that could be done over the holiday break this year, or are we talking something 6 months down the road? I'm just thinking of student impact.
We're looking at one of the Fridays coming up. Where,
Oh, soon. Okay.
or even when school is out. We also talked about November 11th as an option too.
Great.
So it will have very little impact to the school in general, just basically be that facilities building.
And we're working closely with our athletic directors to ensure there aren't any conflicts over games and other school events that may be happening.
And just a note that if you're not aware of it, there is emergency backup for the data box that where all the communications come into that location. And so if it has to, it'll kick on and keep that up and running.
When we approved this project, we were given a cost estimate, and we approved it. So I guess I'm a little confused on, are we just validating how the cost may have changed?
So if you recall, when I came to you with the bus and the infrastructure, we hadn't actually started the infrastructure project yet. And we didn't even calculate soft costs or, the gate. There wasn't, the gate wasn't even in it. So there were other costs that we hadn't accounted for because the project hadn't started. We didn't know what it was going to actually cost. So this is where the work came in, where we're now actually, now that we've got the 2 buses and we know we have to, work on the infrastructure, this is where this is coming in, is with all the details as much as we can so that you actually have high estimate numbers to work with.
So there is not a current set aside for this TBD, is
No.
what you're saying?
No.
Okay.
So when did the gate come into conversation? Because this is the first time hearing about the gate.
The gate came into the conversation when we had PG&E out there with us a month or 2 ago.
I would say probably early summer is when that came into play.
Early summer. So when we met with PG&E and we were looking at where the EV charges would be located, that was when we determined that we would need a gate because our actual opening right now where the buses would have to go in would not suffice.
And that's over by the maintenance?
It's the maintenance yard. It's the maintenance yard / bus depot.
We might need to look at that because I'm just picturing in my head and it seems like it's wide open. But that I'm just saying because I'm sitting here, I'm not looking at it. So
Yeah, I would appreciate that.
maybe just in making file up with a Friday memo or something like that. That would be. I mean, I know we can also drive by, but perhaps it could be beneficial to have that.
There's an opening right now, but that opening with the buses trying to get in there, where it's set up where the EV chargers
Will be.
Yes.
Okay. So I think what I'm sensing, Dr. Vang, is we know soft costs come up. We know unknown things come up. But I think why this is a larger pill to swallow right at the moment is that that's a big TBD soft cost that I guess if I'm reading the room a little bit, that how did that get missed? Because I know when you do a construction project, you know, a general contractor or whoever will do their best to anticipate soft costs with fixed costs. And so, am I reading the room correctly? Yep. Okay. So I think we're now, I have a feeling that the board feels a little bit up against a wall because the project's underway, the buses are here. We now have to get the buses charged to work. And anybody, I don't want to speak for all of you, so please go ahead and chime in, but I'm kind of
Feels like
sensing.
a change order. The way it was presented sounded like, oh, this is just, it's what you already approved, but it is actually maybe change orders.
It is actually the full EV busing infrastructure with the details that we didn't have before. Because when I came to you before, it was really just the grant, right? It was really
Right,
more
it was
about
just-
the grant,
Okay.
about how much we were getting in terms of our rebates, in terms of what the grant was providing. At the time, even my predecessor didn't have those numbers. So there wasn't a clear idea of what the infrastructure was really going to look like until we start really digging into what is this going to look like? What does this mean? And that's when we met with, PG&E and the contractors to really look at this project in full detail.
Okay.
But it sounds like that was in the summer that you did that, though. Is that correct?
We started looking, I thought it was a little after the summer, but we had PG&E, we met with PG&E, and we started talking about a possible expanding the gate, right, I thought it was a little right after the summer, but right about that time.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else, trustees?
I'm just thinking about in the future, how do we decrease or prevent, can't prevent soft costs, but how do we decrease soft costs in the future? Are soft costs, are they most likely occurring after a project is underway, or are they things that we can anticipate before a project even begins?
Well, I think that honestly for the busing infrastructure, because that wasn't in full transparency, coming in last year, I would have to say that we had the grant, but we didn't really look into the infrastructure. It wasn't until I brought Greystone into and said, hey, we've got these 2 buses, we've got chargers, we haven't really had a discussion about the infrastructure. I know PG&E, we're supposed to be meeting with them, but we don't really have, a plan in place. So, I apologize that this is like, but really, the grant was all I really had my hands on.
Sure.
And it wasn't until I started really digging into the infrastructure where I was like, oh, this is going to be a bigger project, a bigger cost than what the grant is even going to pay for.
Right.
Cover.
I want to be clear that I'm not trying to point a finger at that. That's not, because I know that this happens. I think for the board's sake, it might be helpful as we start to tackle facilities and all of this, is that we are given a scenario that soft costs are in there so that we can already start to digest that information and not knowing that change orders come up or unknown factors come up. But I think if we have a full picture that says fixed, potential soft costs, contingency, that helps our mindset, it helps our budget, it helps us understand that. And then if we have the benefit of it coming in at $300,000 and not $1 million, then yay, But I think what I'm sensing is that board might like to have that entire
Picture.
picture of a budget. So, and again, please don't take that. It's just, it's a little, it's a little uncomfortable to have to sit there and all of a sudden say we have to do this because we have to.
Yeah, I asked that question for a lesson learned for me. So
Yeah.
thank you for
Yeah.
saying that so eloquently.
And I guess for me, if this is coming to the November board meeting, let's say it's, I know we haven't even gotten to the third line item, but let's say it's $2 million. That's not accounted for in the current fiscal year budget already. So I don't know how, I guess in the meeting, are we going to be given options on how to fund it? Like,
Yes.
I don't
so
know. I don't know how to
let-
make November board meeting more effective.
Right. So let me get through the third one,
Okay.
and then I will give you my proposal as to how we can fund these. Okay.
Okay.
All right. And then now for that third item, which is the big item, which was unexpected, the primary school roof. We just received the assessment. We had contractors who came out while I was on vacation, and they actually assessed the situation, and we just received the assessment yesterday. I have it. If anybody wants a copy, I can email it to them. But again, I'll hand this over to John and to Steve because this is going to be a heavy lift for us as well.
Okay. So, as we discussed, the report just came in, so when we developed our estimate, we still have to incorporate some of these items to finalize some numbers. But essentially, the report said that the biggest problem was where we had roofing coming down from the main roof to the roof over the walkways, and there's a flashing issue with that caused the dry rot issue.
What, a flashing, is that what you said?
Yeah, they're
What is that?
flat metal flashing. It's a sheet metal product that is bent in a certain shape that go over. And so when you have that, what they did was they brought the paper up to the top of the slope of the canopy roof, and then they brought the shingles up to that location. But what they didn't do in most of the locations is they didn't tie in the underlayment to tie both roofs together. So what you had was a flashing that was pretty much vulnerable to wind-driven rain to get inside and to run underneath that underlayment. So then it rotted out the plywood at the ceiling, as well as it got rotted enough where some of the battens started to come out also.
Was water pooling as well?
It wasn't pooling because we have enough slope there.
Okay.
It just got underneath and didn't have anywhere to go
Yeah.
except for eventually just rotting it through.
Okay, thank you.
The second area was found at some of the lower locations of the walls where the T111 siding was on the outside of the building, and that was at random locations. And when we opened up one of the areas, we found that there was dry rot behind the wood. Actually, you could see it physically at the bottom, and when you opened it up, you could see that it had gotten in with some little bit of mold area inside the wall cavity, and then there was compromise on the waterproofing as it came down. So we're not quite sure why that occurred, but it needs to have some further investigation and also to quantify just how many locations that's at.
For clarification, Steve, when was this project done?
When was it built?
So this was
This-
this was put on.
This is not currently a project.
No.
Yeah, but what you're describing, this is when the buildings were
Constructed.
constructed. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
So we're going on how many years now? This is 20?
24, maybe
24.
22.
Okay, thank you.
Something there.
In addition to that, the columns, the wood columns that are anchored to a concrete base with a steel bolting base, what they call a post base, that's a knife type detail. So what you have to do is slice a slice through the bottom of the post, and it sits right over top of a metal connection. The bolts and the steel at that location are all rusting pretty good in a lot of locations. Some are not as bad as others, but we're getting some recommendations from the structural engineer on what should be done with that. As well as at the top of the post where it connects to the beam, there are some areas where we're going to put in some flashing that needs to be put in to protect the end of the beam so it doesn't get water damage. So we have the roof to the main roof to canopy roof. We have the outside walls. We have the columns at the base. And we also have a roof that is pretty much at the end of its life cycle. You can see the fibers coming through the shingles on most of the main roof. And so it all needs to be addressed.
Scroll up a little bit, Kay. That detail right there shows
The flashing issue.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you'll notice that there's just this like little 6-inch offset in the roofs there. And that is some of the areas that Steve's talking about how that transition happens and how it was detailed and built and where that particular issue is occurring.
So was that not done properly the first time, or is this just time that's happened?
I think there was some in when all of those pieces and components were put together. In some cases, we saw that, and you can see it. There are certain spots where it's dry rotted through, and other areas where it hasn't. And I think it's just that in some of those spots, the paper wasn't brought up all the way, and it was just in a location where it was wind driven with the rain coming in. So a lot of factors go into that.
When you're doing waterproofing with the building paper or whatever that waterproofing substrate is, there's always a lap that comes over. So it's lapping 6 to 8 inches essentially, so that when there is wind-driven rain or any water, it can't wick up and make its way back into the wood that's going to rot. And so I think we've seen that it's either hasn't been gone up far enough or it's deteriorated, and you don't have that lap anymore, and it's been deteriorated for some time, kind of thing. We are going to try and see if we can get some facility hardship funding for this. That's something that we need to speak with King about, but again, we just got this report yesterday, and
Right.
so the numbers we've given you are based off of a concept. We don't have any drawings. We just have kind of what we've seen and trying to do Google Earth
Sure.
estimates on it.
And did you say the cost also is to replace the roofing? Or you were saying that the roof also needs to be replaced?
Yes, that would be replacing all the roofing.
The cost
in
includes
this estimate?
the cost to replace the roofing asphalt shingles are in this number.
It's in the 4.55. Okay, so when
Okay.
I go back to the primary school deferred maintenance slide, I'm just trying to equate it back to what we were saying.
Sure.
There's a exterior paint dry rot repair for 300,000, and then a replace roofing and gutters. I mean, basically, those are
For 1.4,
almost
right.
ignore those.
Right,
and
so
this is what
so
we're-
we had about 1.7 figured in there.
Right.
Until we did that destructive testing, then
Okay,
we're
right.
seeing all of this dry
Sure.
rot that's underneath that you can't
Exactly.
see from above. And then,
That's
you
where
know,
all the issues.
and then start
we
looking
find
at
it.
those
Okay.
at those posts and the knife plates and some of the connections.
So when we were asked to prioritize the St. Helena Primary School painting and dry rot, it's basically going to be replaced with this project in a way?
Yes.
Cost is different,
Yes.
but that's. okay.
Yes.
I'm
And
just
again,
trying to equate
these
it.
costs will
It will change.
change. We put them together really quickly.
Yep.
And we just got this report.
Yep,
So.
thank you.
Okay.
And I think so to put that into the context, we're saying this project would reset the clock on those 2 items as well. So then you'd be right back at the beginning of that 20 to 25 years for that deferred maintenance. So it would zero out those two, and on that sheet.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to equate it back to. Thank you.
One of the photos at the very beginning, I'm looking at, it was like in the almost the underbelly, is that like a hazard to our students and staff walking underneath those at the moment? I think there was another one that was even higher up too. I just want to, that's what I'm thinking about, that is anything in the predicament of falling sooner, or maybe it wasn't, I
think it was the one further down that was actually part of the
It's
siding.
actually on page 2 of 2 here. There's a section that looks like it's just right out of, I think it's higher up, actually. It's on the second page. It's where the rusted beam is, and I just want to, I know that the assessment, the people who performed the assessment probably seen that it was okay. Are you on page 2? Okay. Oh. Right, there it is. Keep going right up there. See that? Yeah, that's what I'm looking at. That looks a little precarious in my vision, but again, maybe not. I just wanted to just make sure that that's, that just looks like a piece of something could fall down on somebody. I'm envisioning that's like where the little people hang their backpacks outside. So that's why I'm just wanted to.
We actually walked that. Mike, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, and I can obviously have my crew go over there and we
Okay.
can, yeah.
Yeah.
If it does, Daryl was actually the one that had found
Okay.
the issues and then
Sure.
alerted me to it. But obviously there had been a couple of the battens, those skinny ones that had fallen previously that we hadn't known about. But yeah, we'll go back over there and take a look to see
Okay.
if there's anything that needs to be secured or
Great.
just removed.
Okay, thank you.
And in addition to that, we did have a structural engineer that day walking it, and I said, so what do we need to worry about here? And he said, I would not have any of the staff up on the roof because you could fall through there in a couple of spots.
Okay.
I said, what about on the ground for people below it? And he said that I would take down some of the loose material, but he said, you're not in danger of
Okay.
anybody getting hurt, so.
And let me ask what may be a very obvious question. So let's say this roof repair and dry rot repair goes forward, and the roofing company is doing all this. Are you guys the people checking their work as they go? I mean, because I want to now make sure that the flashing and the water barriers are like going up to the right level.
So there would be an inspector of record, a DSA inspector
Great.
that would
Okay.
be, as well as the roofing company needs to come and they need to do a roof manufacturer's warranty.
Okay, great. So it's a DSA really oversight on this.
Exactly.
Okay.
There's
Okay.
a lot. There's gonna be a lot of levels built into that, but ultimately it'll come back from the roof rep, and then you will hire an independent
Yeah,
inspector.
I mean, because to your point, I mean, we don't know if it wasn't just done properly or if it's deterioration, but it seems like since price tags are a lot different than they were 25 years ago, we want to make sure that we don't have this issue 3 years after a new roof gets put on, kind of thing. Okay, I'll stop there.
So then we may want to anticipate even more than this amount if that bond passes too. We're going to probably have to add, what is it, 4,000,009 or whatever. We need to probably add another 15% or so, right, for inflation on this project? Because once the bond passes, you're saying that everything goes up.
Yeah, I think what we want to do is we want to be really, like I said, we got this report a couple days ago. We really want to digest it. We want to make sure that we come back to you with a clear understanding and not be overly reactionary. But by then, we will certainly know if the bond passed or not, so we can build in some of that inflation just to make sure we have a good mind. And then we're going to come back and make sure that we have a healthy contingency, right? Because what we don't want to do is come back and say, hey, well, you guys said this. We are diving deeply into the unknown. And so we're going to do that together, but we're going to do it with a strong contingency,
Okay.
and we'll definitely make sure that we build in any sort of inflation that we understand post-election, and with a lot of transparency, right? We're going to share this with you. We're going to come back and tell you what we're doing, and then we're going to start, as we rip it open, it'll be like, hey, it's June. I'm sure you missed me. We ripped your roof apart, and here's what we see there, right? We'll be very transparent through that whole process. But at this point, let us kind of digest this, and over the next week, we'll know a lot more about the bond passing and the inflation, and we can tighten up those numbers for you for sure. Again, this is just really to present an initial understanding of, for transparency, for what we've seen. This is where we're at, and this is what we're looking at, wrapping that up. But we'll make sure that we definitely have some updates for you as we know more and learn more about what's happening.
Right.
And then my last question is so, and if this does move forward, which sounds like we don't really have a choice on this one, would that be summer work? And is there enough time during the summer for that to be taken care of?
Yeah, I think at this point we'd have enough time to be able to do that work. We'll hustle through DSA. We'll let them know it's coming so they can look through it. And the scope of work is pretty well defined, and it's one we can get drawn quickly, and we get it through, and we'd be working collaboratively with the contractor to onboard them, so that they're not walking into the summer blindly. We'd look to kind of bid it early and quickly to bring a contracting partner on board so they can come start doing some of this destructive investigations during the spring to really prepare themselves as best as possible, and then just work through it collaboratively and transparently through the summer with them doing that.
Okay. I mean, this just shows you how destructive water is when it's intrusive in buildings, which is why, for me, I prioritize a lot of things that were water related, because once water gets in, it just multiplies.
Trickle down effect, no pun intended.
Ah, nicely done. Anyway, okay. So Dr. Vang, what do you need from us right now?
So, right now, what I wanted to do was just go back to this the question was, where's all this money going to come from, right? I mean, we have to pay for these projects, so where are they going to come from? So what I'm proposing is, as you all know, we have our property taxes come in basically in two pots during the month of December and is a March or April. I don't want to move any funds prior to the December, when we get our first allocation in December for cash flow purposes, just to ensure that we have cash flow. And so what I'm proposing is, right now we have a fund balance set aside of a total of 5 million here. What I am proposing is, because the primary school project, we need to do some work during the spring leading up to the summer. However, we won't actually start construction until summer. For the busing and for the solar, that's $1 million set aside, and that project's going to start in the summer. Busing, we've started part of that, and so what I'm proposing is we can use this $5 million set aside, but not moving the entire amount over, just moving 2.5 in December, and then moving the remainder after we get the second pot in March or April, to ensure that there's cash flow, and then I'll just inform the board as I'm monitoring the cash flow. But that was my proposal, is to use the set aside that's already in our budget assumptions, and moving those when we do get our allocation in December and March.
Okay, it's March, March, not April?
It's either March or April.
Okay, the second, okay.
And just so I understand, if anything else emergency like comes up, then it would be, we've exhausted our general fund for the year, for the school year, fiscal year, then it would be reserves. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, Sean, that's important.
So it looks like for this round, for this year, it sounds like it's a good, just, looking at the numbers the way they are, about $6.5 million that we're needing to fund right now.
Correct.
And so 2.5, you'll move that in December. To take all of the set aside, 2.5 in December, and then the rest of it from the set aside in March or April.
Yes.
And then, so that's 5 million, and then we have another $1.5 million.
And keep in mind that the $1 million set aside for the EV, for the solar project, that's a set aside that we may not need the entire piece. In Fund 40, I still have some remaining funds in Fund 40 from prior projects where we didn't use up all the funds. So I think I may have, I'm confident that I have enough in Fund 40 to cover the balance.
Okay.
So what I want to do is hold off until you move the 5 million, December and March or April, and then see where we are, and then I'll come back to the board if we need to move more.
Okay. So today you want that action item?
No, I don't need an action item today. Today is just all information for you to absorb.
Okay. So that would be your November board
Correct,
meeting ask.
correct.
Okay. So that we also have time to sit on this, trustees, and you can always revisit with Dr. Vang for additional questions on understanding the funding and whatnot in more detail, if need be.
And what happens if this roofing project comes back a lot more than that, or they start on it and find there's another $1 million involved or something? Where does that come from?
Well, I mean, that's what happens with construction.
Sale?
I mean,
I think what we'll try to do too is to build a budget with very healthy contingencies, right? I mean, that's one of the things that we're going to do proactively, is to make sure that every project has a pillow, right? So when we come back to you, we'll say, if we get into this project, and we'll know right away the rough magnitude of it, right? As soon as we rip it all apart, we'll have complete transparency into it. Then we're going to kind of come back and start to balance that based on our contingencies. This is what we thought. This is what we have. This is where our contingency lies. We can kind of do that check-in pretty quick. If this thing blooms into something that is much, much larger than we have, we'll be able to have those conversations quickly and respond as fast as we can to that. But it will be, I imagine, that we'll be back in June with that roof ripped off and really have kind of a tough check-in to just make sure that we say, hey, this is where we're at, and this is where our contingency was. But we are building the budget with some pretty healthy contingencies in it right now.
Yeah, because if it's a wet winter
Yeah.
and come June, there could be a lot more dry rot.
And that's
So-
the thing too, like, my hope is that we can kind of take this through a leaseback process where we can bring in a contractor early and start to really have them do some of that investigation with us so that we have a contracting partner.
Okay.
And we'll work to kind of have that, transparency with you as much as we can.
Appreciate that.
And build those budgets in a way that can accommodate as much of that flux as we can.
Okay.
But there's nothing like imminent right now that if it pours rain next week, our kids, the roof's not going to fall on them, or, do we have to buy buckets? We're talking June. What happens if it's a wet winter? Do we have concerns that?
Well, I think you guys have been really proactive about that. You've had a licensed structural engineer walk the site. You have feedback from
Yeah.
him in your hands now. He is a structural engineer that I work with frequently and is who I would likely bring in to do the construction documents. So you have a head start on that. His comments were very clearly, right, make sure the staff's not up on the roof. We don't need to worry about a whole lot of loading, I don't think, at this point, right? We don't have a lot of snow. We're not Tahoe, so we don't need to worry about 10 feet of snow on there. So we will, because there is good shedding and slopes to the roof, it will continue to shed the water. So I don't think we need to worry about a significant gravity load. And because it is so highly on our radar now, we'll make sure that we do some walks and kind of do visual inspections throughout the winter, especially in those times where we see really heavy rainfall.
Okay. Thank you.
And sorry, the 4.5 million for the roofing project, that does have the heavy contingency, or not yet?
Not yet.
I think right now it has, we do have a contingency in there for, help me out here.
What percent?
You had it on yours.
I think it's at number 2.
Well, yeah, we currently have a $499,000 contingency in there.
You can just round that
Like
up to
what
half a
percent? Yeah, I know.
So we're
500K.
estimating, so we're at, total project, if you're looking at that, it's over 10%, right? Because if we're taking 4.5 million, we're at $500,000 contingency.
Yeah.
So
And when you say healthy, what is healthy to you?
I'd
To
be
change it to-
I'd be ecstatic to have most districts are hesitant to building contingencies.
I know.
And so I already feel really good about having that.
Okay.
If we, let me review the report, and if we can
That's
start
fine.
kind of dial that in, we'll take, right now we're kind of big lump sum. The roof's gonna cost this,
That's fine. Thank you.
we'll build that back, but we'll definitely be real transparent
I just
with
didn't know
that.
what healthy meant when
I'm
you said
happy
it.
to see 10.
Okay, thank you.
I'm,
Okay, trustees, we're over. So I want to be mindful of everybody's workday and other meetings that everybody have at this point. So I think we're going to have to stop here unless there's like one, simple question that you need asked of our consultants that are here today. Otherwise, perhaps you can get your questions to Mr. Heller and Dr. Vang, and they can get them answered on our behalf. But like I say, I do want to be mindful since we've taken up a lot of everybody's time already today. So, if with that, I'd like to just move to adjourn if everybody is comfortable. Thank you very much for answering all our questions, providing us the information. You always have to deliver less than confetti news to us. So, I appreciate you doing it. And I just appreciate your candidness and your transparency. So thank you with that very much. So with that, we're going to move into adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn the board study session?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Meeting adjourned at 11:59 a.m. Thank you again, everybody.